Hi, this is Nash Jocic. I'm going to talk now about muscle growth. Everybody wants to know what is the most important factor that causes muscle growth. Well, although everybody knows in order to build bigger muscles you have to go to the gym and train with weights, people don't understand fully what is the most important factor for building big muscles. For muscle growth, the most important factor is high intensity weight training. But that doesn't look clear to many people. Lots of people believe that actually nutrition is the most important factor that will increase muscle tissue. That for muscle growth you have to eat, and you have to eat a lot. So what often happens, you can see people eating 5, 6, 7 times per day, especially beginners, newcomers. They want to grow big, they want to grow fast, they're not patient, they start eating a lot, they're buying all those supplements, protein powders, amino acids, creatine, all kind of tablets, vitamins, minerals, simply believing that this is the #1 factor for muscle growth. But what happens, and it happens a lot, you can see that people get a little bit bigger, they get heavier, but unfortunately they get bigger in the wrong places, and most of the weight that they gain is actually body fat. So if you believe that nutrition is #1 factor for muscle growth, I will have to disappoint you and say no, it's not. #1 factor for muscle growth is high intensity weight training. And now we're going to talk about muscle growth on the cellular level and how that actually happens. Muscle growth occurs on 2 different levels. First, we can talk about sarcoplasmic growth of muscle cells. Second, we can talk about myofibrillar growth. So sarcoplasmic growth is simply increase of liquid within the muscle cell. This can happen for many different reasons. We're talking about hormonal reasons, we're talking about overfeeding of the cell due to hormonal signals for growth, etc. But the other side, the other type of growth that we are after is actually growth of myofibrils. Myofibrils make muscle fibers. So in general there are 2 types of muscle fibers. Type 1 or slow twitch muscle fibers and type 2 or fast twitch muscle fibers. Now type 1 slow twitch muscle fibers, they don't grow in size. These are the muscle fibers that we use for walking, jogging, running, biking. These are highly oxidative muscle fibers. They require oxygen for energy. Muscle fibers type 2 are the one that we use when we train with weights. Weight training requires fast twitch muscle fibers type 2. Now, muscle fibers type 2 can be further split into 2 groups. We have type 2A and type 2B. Type 2A muscle fibers are the ones that we use when we use medium intensity training. So when we don't really push 100%, then we use predominantly those muscle fibers which are fast twitch type 2A. But the problem with those muscle fibers is that they only grow in size for some 25%. So while slow twitch muscle fibers don't grow in size and they're not relevant for muscle growth, fast twitch muscle fibers type 2A do grow in size, but only for some 25%. Now, fast twitch muscle fibers type 2B are the muscle fibers they can grow 100%. So these are the muscle fibers that we want to target with our training. So how do we actually stimulate engagement of these muscle fibers? Type 2B. The body is a very clever mechanism, and the nature has created a human body up with perfection. These muscle fibers type 2B are actually the muscle fibers that we'll only use in the situation where we are fighting for our life, okay? And when we have to do something that we, with extreme intensity, that we never did before, alright? And if we do it, we will survive. If we don't do it, we're gonna die. So then these muscle fibers switch on. So they are very stubborn. You will never use them in normal life, but you only use them in critical situations. Or if you create a critical situation during your workout, the only way to create that critical moment is actually high intensity set. So extremely high intensity set, or something that I call all-out set. So what it means, for example, if you perform a set of 10 reps and you have just finished 7th rep and you would like to drop those weights down because you are exhausted, you are tired, the muscles are aching. If you drop those weights down, we are talking about medium intensity. So you're going to be using muscle fibers type 2A, but you want to use muscle fibers type 2B. That means that you're not going to drop those weights and you're going to try as much as you can to lift them 8th time and then to lift them 9th time and then to complete 10 reps. That last rep has to be literally of enormous intensity. This is when your most important muscle fibers get into action. This is when you engage your muscle fibers type 2B, and these are the ones actually that will give you the most of the growth. So now, once we understood why it's important to train with extremely high intensity in order to stimulate the most important muscle fibers for us, for muscle growth, which are muscle fibers, fast twitch muscle fibers type 2B, let's look inside the muscle fibers and actually what is causing that increase in muscle fibers or increase in muscle tissue itself. So once we perform this high intensity training session, we will be using all our muscle fibers. We will even use red muscle fibers in certain degree. We will use a lot of white muscle fibers type 2A, but we will use also white muscle fibers type 2B. While using them, we will cause micro trauma within the muscle fibers. So we will cause microscopic tears of the muscle fibers. So there is something phenomenal in human physiology which is called a phenomenon of supercompensation. In order to explain that phenomenon of supercompensation, I will remind you about something that everybody knows. For example, if you look at your calluses on your hands, you will see that skin there has thickened. The body has increased the size of the skin, thickened the skin, simply because your skin is constantly exposed to high friction, or in a way, if you want it, to high intensity damage, and your skin is damaged there. In order to survive, the body is not just rebuilding the skin, but is rebuilding it with more tissue, and you are forming your calluses. For example, when the bone breaks anywhere in the body, the point of breakage will seal, the body will recover that fracture, but will also build a callus around. So the bone will be thickened on that place where the fracture occurred. And that will mean that the bone will never be broken on the same place. Now, This is the principle of supercompensation, and this also applies to muscle tissue, to muscle fibers. So when we cause that microtrauma, we actually force the body to exercise that phenomenon of supercompensation and actually not just rebuild broken down muscle fibers, broken down muscle tissue, but also to put a little bit more tissue, to develop a little bit more tissue, simply in order to survive the next training session easier. Because we are very adaptable. Every single tissue of ours is very adaptable, and also muscle tissue. The body will try everything to adapt to the stress that we apply to that particular tissue, in our case, muscle tissue. So now you understand the principle of supercompensation and why microtrauma causes thickening, increase in muscle fibers, simply because of that phenomenon of supercompensation. I think I have explained to you now exactly how and why muscles grow, and what is the most important factor in muscle growth. So the most important factor in muscle growth is definitely high intensity training. Nutrition comes after. High protein, medium fat, relatively low carbohydrate diet will be the best type of diet to support that phenomenon process of supercompensation and allow you to grow. And remember, even the best food in the world will never make you bigger unless you exercise with high intensity.